Yeah, and it's not an overnight prediction. It's not tomorrow. It goes like this, right? So gold is the only money in the world. And what is money? Money is an asset that exists in the absence of a liability. Now everybody says, well, what about all this other stuff? You know, these dollars or yen or euros. We use them as money. Well, no, we use them as currency. And they're created by banks, central banks, and they're backed by debt. So it's not that they're bad or evil. It's just they're not money. Money is an asset that exists in the absence of a liability. And so for 5,000 years, it's a long time, gold has played that role. And we had experiments with other things along the way, puka shells and stone wheels and things like that. But gold has survived through belief and custom. And 1 ounce of gold for 5,000 years has bought a fine person's suit. So from Cleopatra's time to a suit of armor to a zoot suit in the 20s to Savile Row today, you or I could go to Savile Row and for a single ounce of gold, about $1,900, we could get a fine suit. And that's about what it would take. So what's changed? Well, gold suffers from two things. It's not very portable, meaning it's really heavy and clunky, and it's not very divisible. Like if I had a bar of gold here and go pull it out of the safe and I wanted to give you half, right? Because it's been a nice interview. I wanted to give you half. Even if I could break it in half, which I couldn't do, I'd have a hard time stuffing it in the computer and sending it to you. So it's not very divisible. I can't break it in half, and it's not very portable. I can't send it to you. Well, Bitcoin fixes both of those. It is equally scarce. Its stock to flow ratio is the same as gold. The amount that's lost or stolen every year roughly equals the amount that's created. And so it's a scarce asset. Well, why do scarce assets matter? Well, a scarce asset, which also exists in the absence of a liability, it wasn't created by a government with debt, has an interesting feature of being a perfect store of value. So as people realize that in the digital age, and Bitcoin being more divisible and more portable, I can punch a few buttons on my smartphone and send you Bitcoin immediately. You don't have to have a bank account. I don't need to have a bank account. We can make that transfer of wealth instantaneously. So the monetary value of gold, to sum up, is about $6 trillion, give or take. The total value of gold is about 11, but 5-ish of that is jewelry and chalices, and that doesn't really count. But the monetary that's in central banks around the world is about 6 trillion. I think Bitcoin can replace all of that. The monetary equivalent, 6 trillion, is about a 10x from here. So it gives us a price of about 300K. Look, I've said for years, so that was like a 10-year process, and we're probably 3-4 years into that. So I can still, I would say the next halving, not this halving in 2024, but the 2028. And where do I get that? Well, every halving, we've added a zero. We've about 10 times the market cap of Bitcoin. So we went from 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000. I think this halving next April, we go to 100,000 as fair value. But in these movements during crypto fall, right? We're in crypto summer today until next June. Then after the halving, we go to crypto fall. That's the parabolic, everybody's crazed and FOMO rules. We usually go above fair value. So I think we could get into the high hundreds, maybe even a couple hundred, but let's call it the high hundreds, 150, 180. And then we go into the next crypto winter. So we have our correction. Then for the next halving in 2028, the fair value jumps to $1 million. And people say, $1 million, that could never happen. Well, hopefully by that time, we're not talking about Bitcoin, we're talking about Satoshis. Because the Satoshi is the unit of measure that we should all, I think, be talking about, which is there are 100 million Satoshis per Bitcoin. And then we don't have to think about, well, Bitcoin's $1 million. No, a single Satoshi is worth fractions of pennies at some point.
Welcome to the Crypto Teacher. And I come back with that video just to make you think.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
And guys, we have Mark Yusko on the Fed and Bitcoin, speaking about his predictions of Bitcoin hitting 300,000 and speaking of the halving. And guys, when we look at every halving, we see the Fed manipulating around the same time as getting a pump. And yes, the Fed raised rates, and also the other central banks have raised rates, but all of them have a safety net, And that's the reason why all these stock markets across the globe are doing great in a high interest environment. The stock market should be tanking, but if you go to these central banks' websites, you'll see they're propping up everything. And eventually they have to pull it, but we know they set up that distraction. When it comes to the Fed, they were doing QT, shrinking the M2 money supply. But then once the banking crisis came in, they started to bail these banks out, and they're still doing it. But we also see the consolidation because we know these small and medium-sized banks are not going to make it in the fourth industrial revolution. We're not going to see any more hikes going forward, but we see these banks tightening credit. And we know the Fed and the central banks want to keep these rates higher for longer in order to destroy this legacy market. When we look at all the sectors that were hurt temporarily, we see the Fed was behind it. The supply chain was the biggest one. But remember, guys, all this is going to be on blockchain, and we're living in a fragmented world. They have to break it all up in order for the fourth industrial revolution can rise, where the robots, algorithms, and drones take the economy over, pay each other with crypto, and the sheep go inside the metaverse. And the only way Bitcoin can hit 300,000 or a million is going to have to be pegged to gold or pegged to these robots, algorithms, and drones. And remember, the crypto teacher told you, because he knows when it comes to the New World Order, it's all planned out. You have a wonderful day.
I think it was mostly a non-event. You've seen that in the market reaction. It had been priced in the market for weeks. And, I think the thing that people really are paying more attention to, or should be paying more attention to, is the fact that despite the rhetoric on higher short-term rates, they are still expanding the money supply. So M2 has turned back up really since the bailout of SVB. And I think that's why you've seen things like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies do so well. Because remember, we don't price Bitcoin in Bitcoin. We price Bitcoin in dollars or yen or euros. And those currencies are all continuing to weaken. So I think we're done with the Fed funds rate. The funny thing about the Fed funds rate, I don't know about you, but I don't borrow at Fed funds. No one I know borrows at Fed funds. It's really a rate that is used for interbank transfers and loans. And a higher Fed funds rate allows the banks to have higher spreads, higher net interest margins. And it's good for bank profits. So I think that part of the market may cool down a little bit after having a nice run here lately, if there's not going to be any more increases in Fed funds. But overall, I don't think the market's, looking at interest rates going forward. I think now everybody's focused on, he said there's going to be no recession. So now we can take the boogeyman off our back and focus on all this growth. Well, what growth? I mean, I don't see a lot of growth. I don't see any inflation. And inflation was a big part of that growth, in that prices were rising. So people put up higher sales numbers, but then they had higher costs. So the profits weren't going up as much. And look, I think the big thing for me is the earnings game that gets played. You just had a guest on talking about, the meta beat. Look, if you told me a year ago you were going to make $1, you told me 6 months ago you were going to make 50 cents, you told me last week you were going to make 10 cents, and then you make 11 cents, that's not a beat, right? I mean, okay, technically it's a beat, and it goes in the books as a beat. But to me, that's like, being the high jump guy, and you go up and you take the bar off the rack, you put it on the ground, you jump over it, and you call yourself the world champ.
Step over it. Yeah. There's not even any jumping involved there.
No jumping.
You've said that the Fed and other global central banks are quietly increasing liquidity. Tell us more.
Yeah, so it started with China back in October. And, once again, China leads the way, as they are prone to do, in liquidity. They are the kings and queens of producing liquidity. You go back to 2017, and everybody said, the Fed bailed us out, and Bernanke was this hero. No, it was China. They printed 4 trillion with a T dollars, and starting in October, they created about $1 trillion worth of liquidity. The U.S. was still in QT, quantitative tightening. Europe was still in tightening. And what's interesting, I haven't heard the word quantitative tightening in months. And nobody's talking about contraction of the money supply because it's not contracting. It's actually rising. And when you have a rising money supply, you get a weaker currency, and then you get an increase in the price of things that are priced in that currency, like gold, like Bitcoin, and the like. So I think quietly they talk this rhetoric of, hey, we're still hawkish and we're still focused on inflation. Show me the inflation, right? We're at 3%, probably heading to sub 2. Chairman said it's not going sub 2. I'll take the under. You know, the one funny thing about the Fed, and not the chairman, but the Fed is an organization. You know, they have hundreds and hundreds of PhDs, and they forecast inflation and GDP every quarter. And they've been right 0 times. Out of almost 300 estimates, they've never been right. I could flip a coin and be right half the time. So I just think it's interesting. So there's either some gamesmanship in that they intentionally try to be wrong to, you know, create an illusion of beat, right? That's they take the bar off and put it on the ground thing, or some other reason. But I'm not privy to that.
Going to a different economy, and we're going to be learning more about that as we go. But clearly, we're learning that things can be done from remote locations. We're learning that technology can replace people even more than we thought.
We're not going back to the same economy. We're recovering, but to a different economy, and it'll be one that is more leveraged to technology. And I worry that is going to make it even more difficult than it was for many workers.
In Silicon Valley, and my friends who work in technology know that what we did to the manufacturing workers, we are now going to do to the retail workers, the call center workers, the fast food workers, the truck drivers, and then even bookkeepers, accountants, insurance agents, lawyers, and on through the economy. So what happened to the manufacturing workers is a very clear sign.
And so we'll import Chinese-based CBDC technology. So it's going to be CBDC in a box provided to you by the People's Bank of China.
But every stock, every bond, every currency, every commodity, every piece of art, every private business, every piece of real estate will eventually be a token on a blockchain, an entry on a ledger, permanent and immutable. We will have truth instead of trust, and we will save over $7 trillion a year. 6 to 8% of global GDP is wasted by the friction of the trust industry that's necessary when you have dual entry accounting. With triple entry accounting, which is what a blockchain is, we get rid of all of that friction. It's a beautiful future.
Like what you see in China and their social credit scoring systems, right? If we get identity wrong, it could be a tool to enslave humanity. And if we get it right, it could be a tool to liberate humanity. And as an American, I'm obviously rooting for the one that's on the side of freedom.
Bitcoin is an international asset. And also, I do believe the role of crypto is it's digitizing gold.
I actually believe this technology is going to be very important. Look at it. We have been part of the huge revolution in investing through ETFs. We believe that ETFs will be changing the whole way we invest. Many people still use it as a means, people are investing it for indexing. No, the majority of people who are putting money in in ETFs are active investors that are buying exposure. The entire bond market is being transformed as we talk right now. I believe the next generation for markets, the next generation for securities will be tokenization of securities. And if we could have that distributed ledger that we know every beneficial owner, every beneficial seller, we all have our code of who's buying, who's selling, instantaneous settlement. And think about it, it changes the whole ecosystem.
Cryptoteacher and the New World Order book, plus the 3 Kids books. It's time to re-educate. Also, new to cryptos, Coinbase, Bitrue, Binance, Do not forget book links and crypto links are in the description. The stock channel, guys. Don't forget to go like, subscribe, spread everywhere. You have your Kobo, your chip stocks, your banking, your gaming. While everybody's sitting at home, get home stocks, the Seaver, the biotech stocks. And while everybody's at home wishing they were still getting that free money, what are they doing? Drinking and smoking weed. Don't forget about those stocks, and you have a wonderful day. The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come. Steve Jobs. And guys, you know I truly believe in this. When you look at the New World Order, they're the storytellers. And that's the reason why I wrote my New World Order book. But guys, now it's time to change the current generation. And I wrote 3 kids' books. You know I love the Trinity because I understand the power that's in it. So I have 3 books. We have an opportunity to change the generation, to educate, not just me, but I want to show you that I take action on a daily basis. And I want you to take action on a daily basis. Whether it's your job, whether it's in your community, we have an opportunity right now to educate the masses. I posted this on my Twitter account. Please share, but this is a short clip of the 3 books. There's going to be a clothing line and action figures. Please get these books for your kids, nephews, cousins, friends, so therefore we can start the re-education now. Because as we see, the 4th Industrial Revolution foundation is definitely here. Robots, algorithms, drones, taking humanity out the picture. We have to re-educate. But let's get into the video.
Part 1. King Joshua and Grandma Tam save the village. Part 2. King Joshua and Grandma Tam save New York from COVID 33. Part 3. King Joshua and Grandma Tam goes to China.
It's mandatory to get part 1, part 2, and part 3 of this series. It's time to re-educate Generation Z.